Here we are today standing in front of Alumni Hall on the campus of Georgia State University. Alumni Hall houses the offices of the president of Georgia State University and other administrative offices. We're standing near the intersection of Gilmer Street and Cortlandt Street. Gilmer Street runs west and east. Cortlandt Street is the north-south behind us, and down east of us here is Piedmont Avenue. Alumni Hall is what's left of a much larger structure that was built here in 1907 to 1909. It was officially known as the Atlanta Auditorium Armory because the auditorium served as the entertainment center of Atlanta for 70 years, and it was also home to the Georgia National Guard. But to Atlantans, it was known as the Atlanta City Auditorium or the Atlanta Municipal Auditorium. The auditorium part began with where Alumni Hall now ends and extended eastward parallel to Gilmer Street to within a few feet of Piedmont Avenue in front of us. The importance of that building to Atlanta's country music legacy is the fact that between 1913 and 1935, the Atlanta City Auditorium was home to an annual gathering of old-time fiddlers who came from all over the state to compete for the Georgia State Fiddlers Championship. Some of Georgia's finest fiddlers, of course, performed here and competed for the title. One of the most familiar names and most prominent of the fiddlers was Fiddlin' John Carson, who won the title on several occasions. Now, unlike Carson, many of the fiddlers came directly from the mountains without benefit of having migrated to the city. And one of these was Gid Tanner, who was a farmer living in Gwinnett County. He was one of the fiddlers that was very popular because he mixed a little comedy in with his fiddling, and he organized a string band called the Skillet Lickers. So Gid Tanner and the Skillet Lickers were a big draw at the Fiddlers Conventions. At the end of the old-time Fiddlers Conventions on Saturday night, after the audience had been entertained and the awards had been given, the audience and the musicians came to the front of the auditorium to Taft Hall, where they had a square dance. After Georgia State University acquired the building, this room was named Veterans Memorial Hall. I think it may have been Taft Hall. So we may be standing in Taft Hall at this time. At least you can get a feel for what Taft Hall may have been like, where the square dances were held, to which fiddlers and other musicians as well as the audience could come for some entertainment after the grand finale of the convention had ended. The Fiddlers Conventions, as I mentioned earlier, stopped in 1935, and a lot of the fiddlers blamed the demise of the Fiddlers Conventions on jazz. They said everybody's interested in jazz now, and nobody has any time for the old-time fiddlers. City Auditorium was sold to Georgia State in 1979. The university took possession of it in 1980, and by 1981, the destruction of the auditorium part of the old auditorium armory was well underway. When they first started demolishing the old City Auditorium, I grabbed my camera and came down and made some pictures. of the destruction. Fortunately, I got some pictures of the auditorium before it was totally dismantled. The demolition had just begun when I took the pictures. I had an attack of nostalgia when I saw the auditorium being demolished, and I sat down and wrote an article for a Fiddlers magazine called The Devil's Box about how the scene of the old-time Fiddlers Conventions in Georgia, the site of those events, was coming to a close. It was goodbye, Atlanta City Auditorium, and no more could people point to that structure and say, that's where they used to hold the Georgia Old-Time Fiddlers Conventions. Part of the ground on which the City Auditorium stood is now home to the William M. Suttles Terrace. William Suttles was provost of Georgia State University and vice president for many years. Much of the ground on which the old City Auditorium stood is now occupied by a student parking deck, Georgia State University parking deck, which you can see behind me. Having grown up in the hills of North Georgia and having been a neighbor of A.A. Gray, one of the most famous of the old-time fiddlers who performed at the City Auditorium, but lacking talent, I decided to write about country music and decided to concentrate on the history of country music as it transpired in Atlanta, because Atlanta was a very important city in the history of country music. So in about 1979, I decided I would try to write a book about it, and I started interviewing the people who were a part of that history, as many of them who were still living. And in 1990, my book was finally published by the University of Illinois Press. I called it Picking on Peachtree, A History of Country Music in Atlanta, Georgia.